What do we make about the Toronto Blue Jays? They play in the biggest market. They have a whole, basically half of the continent. And they're filled with stars and great expectations that fell short last year, including a spectacular collapse. Ben Alquist is here to talk about the Blue Jays and thoughts about their hopes of 2023. I'm pretty optimistic about them. Is he? Are you? The only thing that we're all sure about is that this is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, there's my lower third. Wait, where is it? There it is. You can call me Sully. I'm begging you to call me Sully. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started in your betting. Hey, follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're at Locked On MLB Pods. I'm still on Twitter for the time being. You're just right there. Where is it? I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And please, please, please subscribe to our show on the YouTubes. On the YouTubes, we are trying to get 1 billion followers. And also, keep an eye out if you follow me on Sully Baseball, but also retweet it on the Locked On MLB Pods. In about a month or so, I'm going to be unveiling the new In Memoriam video, which I do at the beginning of each season. There's some very big names that we're going to be paying tribute to this year, including Hall of Famers Gaylord Perry, Hall of Famers Bruce Sutter, and of course the great Vince Scully. And we'll see. And Ted Lerner, who I mentioned on the podcast that we did earlier this week, the former owner of the Washington Nationals, obviously getting his due as well. Hey, I want to talk today. We last week or maybe the week before, forgetting some of these shows blend in my brain. We had Ruth Capulis, who is a Toronto Blue Jay expert and part of the whole Sabre community in Toronto. She was on the show. We were talking about the Blue Jays' chances. And today I'm bringing in another special guest. I'm not sure if he's north of the border, but he's going to be talking about Team North of the Border, who has interacted with me through the YouTubes, and we're bringing him aboard right now. His a brand new friend of the podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about the Toronto Blue Jays with Ben Alquist. Ben, whoops, wrong side of the street. There you are. Switch us around. You're not
Sully, it's my
Sully, I
lower
am.
third.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Flip us around. Flip us around. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sully. It's a great time to be here. Appreciate it.
Well, it is. It is. I mean, when pitchers and catchers have reported, we have that weird sensation of seeing some of the players in their new uniforms for the first time. Last year, I picked the Toronto Blue Jays to win the American League pennant. I do not think I was alone in that pick.
Nope, I was right there with you.
And it's funny. I know you follow the podcast, and I do a thing called the Summer Score, of which I keep track starting at Memorial Day of all the days a team is in a position for a playoff spot, wild card or whatever, and the number of points you get for each day gets larger as the season goes on. It sort of basically shows, what kind of a summer that the fans got. And, obviously being in a wild card position in June is not as exciting as being a wild card position in September. Here's an interesting factor. I'm bringing this up for a reason. Some teams had a perfect summer score in that every single day after Memorial Day, they were in a position for a playoff spot. One of those teams was the Toronto Blue Jays. There was not one day after Memorial Day, basically June, July, August, September, into October, there wasn't one single day where a Blue Jays fan woke up in the morning, looked at the standings, and didn't say, hey, we're a playoff team today. And
Right.
yet the season had this aura of failure.
Yeah.
They fired the manager, they had the awful collapse to Seattle in a season which according to my metric, a summer that was perfect, did not feel so perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, especially going throughout the season. Matt Chapman has ups and downs. Vladdy Guerrero, comparatively speaking, wasn't performing to what a lot of people expected to be a huge replicating season compared to his 2021 season. And then we saw Bichette, obviously the ebbs and flows there, and how his sprint speed is down. There's all kinds of factors across the board that had us worrying, even though the statistics, numerically speaking, per record were great. There was this shadow of a curtain that kind of brought this daunting aura, as you say. So I think 2022, coming into 2022 here and going into 2023 season now, is a great opportunity for this team. I'm really excited to talk about some of the moves. I have a very unpopular opinion on the Teoscar Hernandez trade as well, and I think the front office had a very specific approach and blueprint as to how they wanted to approach this offseason. I think they executed almost perfectly on this offseason.
Well, before we get to the offseason going to this year, let's tie a bow on the 22 years. I said the year that I could point to and the year that is discussed almost don't seem like the same thing. I mean, the Blue Jays won 92 games. I mean, this was by no metric. They won 92 games. They would have been a wild card team under the old format. They had the home field advantage. Granted, they didn't show up to the playoff, the 2 games against the Mariners.
Yeah.
But they were in second place with 92 wins. And the only reason, that wasn't a closer race was basically the fact that the first half of the season, everything went right for New York. Everything.
And they have Aaron Judge.
They had Aaron Judge. But, the team finished the year 22-11. They won 22 of their last 33 games. And they got to within like 2 games or 3 games of the Yankees at one point. But like the Yankees built up such a gigantic lead that, but even with the gigantic lead, it was 7 games separated the two.
Yep.
And the Jays, I'm having I kind of have a hard time wrapping my head around why there was such a sense of failure about the team. And I have to say, I was thoroughly flummoxed when they fired Montoyo. And maybe you can shed a little bit of light. Granted, they played so much better under John Schneider.
Yep.
They played like 20 games above 500 under John Schneider, I think. But I just felt it was strange that a guy had the team in a playoff position and suddenly had to update his LinkedIn page and start applying for new jobs.
Right. It's fascinating. That's a great question to kind of bring to the table, because if you look at the expectation going into 2022, and you and I are on the same page, I thoroughly thought I had Toronto Blue Jays as top 5 team in the league. They have the talent. You look at Bichette, you look at Guerrero, you look at the starting rotation. They were bringing Gosman in. They just upticked the bullpen. They had all the puzzle pieces to make the execution come to fruition and meet the expectations. I think at some point during the season, again, this is all speculation. At some point during the season, there was a click in the front office, and the front office understood, hey, these guys, we have Gurriel Jr., we have Teoscar Hernandez, we have Vladdy Guerrero. They're having a blast. They're having great fun. But sometimes there can be juxtaposing concepts between fun and winning. And I think, I'm a big culture guy. I think clubhouse culture is really important. You got to have fun. You got to love coming to work to ultimately execute and perform to the highest level. But I think what they were seeing is that this is a very young team. They had the components to win, but what they lacked was the competitive drive, the exposure to pieces that had won and performed in high leverage positions in playoffs and XYZ. And so they had all the puzzle pieces, but where those puzzle pieces weren't coming together was the experience, the competitive drive and the focus to get to where they needed to be, which is ultimately competitive playoff positioning, right? And so bringing in new mentality from a coaching perspective, I think really reinvigorated and kind of lit that fire on everyone's butt that, oh yeah, we're having a blast playing, but we still need to execute and get to where and meet and have that parallel between expectations and performance, right? And I think that ties into what they've done a lot with the offseason blueprint as well.
It's funny that I had no thoughts here or there about John Schneider. To me, he was a generic, out of the box manager that I had no thoughts about. And when the wild card series ended so horrifically with the Mariners coming from behind, whatever the heck there was, like 8-1 or whatever the score was that they came from
Yeah.
behind it, and the team just collapsed at home and didn't win a single game. I remember I turned to my friend after listening to that game, and I said, "Well, looks like a new manager's coming to Toronto." I mean, I just figured, like, he's an interim manager. They played well under him, but they just absolutely wet the bed. And I thought, like, okay, there are high-profile names out there, whether it's Bruce Bochy or Joe Madden or whomever it is. There's some big, highfalutin names out there, and John Schneider at the helm of this horrific collapse. I thought, like, okay, well, it'll probably cost him nothing to get rid of this guy and just bring someone new in. So I have to admit, I was a little surprised when John Schneider was welcomed back.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One part of it is I personally, I do understand the concept of when you look at management and when there's failure of execution, and there's obviously a certain degree of that. Another moment that comes to fruition is that when the Seattle Mariners threw in Robbie Ray against Yordan Alvarez, and Alvarez has a huge track record of just raking Robbie Ray. How much of that fault goes to management? Yes, a significant part. I mean, the statisticians should have pulled together a little bit more of a strategic plan there. However, if you look at how they performed in the regular season, and obviously what everyone's looking at is postseason performance, right? And there should be a significant weight that goes into that. There was a turnaround. There was a direct impact as he came into the team and led the team and started to make sure that there was kind of an infusion between where they should be and where they are going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at some point the front office just said, we're going to build around it, and that's when you bring in Don Mattingly with a little bit more of a tenure there, and you start to put together some pieces that can start to scale and build around this coaching staff. Do I think it's the perfect combination? No. Do I think it's a step up from where they were beginning 2022? I think so.
Well, look, at one thing they needed, it looked like, from that first part of the year, the whole team needed a little bit of a boost. They just needed some form of a little boost, give them a little bit of energy. And by the way, if you're looking for a boost of energy, try a Built Bar. Look, we've made it past some of those first hurdles of the new year if you're trying to eat healthy and lose weight, like Super Bowl parties or Valentine's Day candies. All right, but Easter's coming right up for those of you who celebrate, which means lots of those peeps, lots of those candies. Look out. Look out. You'll get good and pudgy just in time for bathing suit weather. That's why you got to try Built Bars, okay? They're healthy, but they're actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you, but they're perfect if you're trying to keep up your New Year's resolutions. Here's what makes them so great. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. You heard me right. Real chocolate. And great flavors. Churro, my favorite, which is raspberry, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, mint chip, all the great stuff. I don't know how Bill does it. I've asked, they won't tell me. These bars taste like candy bars while maintaining amazing macros. For those of you who are into the sabermetrics of candy, let me tell you, this isn't candy, okay? This is a 5-tool player. They've got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, a whopping 17 grams of protein. Come on. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about getting the box. I used to love getting the box. Go to built.com. You can still do that, but you can also go to Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. Get a 4-bar box, cookies, creams, double chocolate, coconut puffs. I won't judge. Or if you go to Sam's Club, you grab a 13-bar box with the hit flavors, brownie batter, churro. You can thank me later. They're all so great. They're all good for you, and they taste great. They're Built Bars. And like the jingle says, Built Bars, they're still good. We're having with Ben Alquist, who is our new Toronto Blue Jays aficionado. Let's talk a
Sully,
little.
I can imagine you getting all those plastic Easter eggs and stuffing them full of Built Bars.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, come Halloween, you stop by Casa del Sully, trick or treat. Here's your Built Bar.
Some raspberry Built Bars.
Raspberry Built Bars. Come on. By the way, that's not really the jingle. That's not even their slogan. I just the copy just kind of ends, and I think it needs a button. And
It needs
because
something to spice it up.
I'm a composer at heart. Music is my life, and I really put my back into that jingle. Built Bars, they're still good.
You're paralleling the Rihanna performance on that. I'm telling you, we just need to get you a platform now,
dude. I'm next year's halftime show. That's all. There is.
I'll hold you to that, Sully.
And if you want me to be the halftime show, put hashtag Sully halftime. Hashtag Sully halftime, and we can do that. We can make this work. We can make this work. Hold on. Can I do that there like this? Hold on a second. So we're good. So anyway, that's not it. Okay, I was trying to do that'd be hashtag Sully halftime. This is when you shouldn't be doing stuff on the fly, but what the heck? There you go.
We're trying new things today. There we go.
Sully halftime. There you go. There you go. I want to see that. I want that trending. Let's go. Let's go. Like most of the world, who is this guy? Why is he talking about the Brewers infield at the Super Bowl halftime show?
Right.
Hey, we're not talking Brewers. We're talking Blue Jays. We're only focusing on teams that Paul Molitor won a World Series with. So there's a lot of moves that were made. The big move was, and I think this is a move that's going to wind up helping two teams.
Yep.
The deal with Teoscar Hernandez. He was sent packing to the Seattle Mariners in a deal that is going to give the pitching staff a legitimate boost, and that they very clearly needed.
Yeah.
And I think Teoscar Hernandez will play very well in Seattle. I think he's going to be a good fit there. And then they bring in Kiermaier. Behind the scenes, in comes Mattingly. I have some thoughts on that, but I'll if you're not going to say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about a year where they won 92 games, and a lot of players didn't play up to the back of their baseball cards.
Yep.
What is your thoughts on this year's the moves and what that means?
Yeah, great question. I think let's go ahead and start with Teoscar Hernandez, because we could talk about Swanson, Varsho, Kiermaier kind of being the three staple pieces throughout the offseason. But if we look at specifically Teoscar Hernandez, fan favorite, obviously you're in the ballpark screaming Teo, get the chants going. Fan favorite in the ballpark, because he's obviously enjoyable. He's got the personality. He's always smiling. He brings something to the clubhouse, like we talked about.
Right.
And he has obviously multi-time Silver Slugger, great offensive production, good athlete. Defense leaves a little bit to love there. But if we're just looking at it from a statistical perspective, let's just compare Kevin Kiermaier to Teoscar Hernandez in that sense. Kiermaier is absolutely incredible. I mean, he gets a bad name because of some of the clips we've seen, like him cutting off Randy Arozarena. But if you're looking at it specifically from the purview of what this guy does in terms of run prevention, Kevin Kiermaier is one of the most elite players we've seen. If he's healthy, playing 120 plus games, which is rare, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But if he's healthy, he's one of the most elite defensive players we've seen this generation. I mean, I'm talking, put him up there with the best of the best in terms of what he does defensively. If you prorate his outs above average or defensive runs saved per inning, Kevin Kiermaier is among the best of the best. Like, it's just hands down there. If we go back to, I believe it was 2017, Kevin Kiermaier was actually on track to post a 6 WAR if he played healthy throughout a 162 game average. And so if we're looking at it just from the purview of statistics and the nerd talk on all that fun stuff, Teoscar Hernandez, great, good offensive production. Kevin Kiermaier is going to get a lot of the less sexy capturing in terms of wins produced, specifically from the team's point of view. And we see that with his elite defense, his amazing speed, and what he can bring in terms of run prevention. Now, in that view, who has a higher ceiling in terms of WAR? It's going to be Kevin Kiermaier. It's just happening in less sexy ways. He's not going to put up 25, 35 homers. He's not going to get you a silver slugger. He's going to steal bases. He's going to keep runs off the board. And he's going to bring that pitching ERA way down to parallel the FIP, right? Which is obviously what people are looking for, feeling independent pitching. And so I think that trade, the Teoscar Hernandez for the Eric Swanson and Adam Macko trade, really put them in a position to go after a Kevin Kiermaier.
Right.
And Kevin Kiermaier's production-wise, in terms of WAR, which is wins above replacement, essentially how many wins this player brings to the table over an average MLB player, is going to be a net positive over Teoscar Hernandez, which sounds weird saying, but that's because we're offensive, superstars. That's the world we live in, is we love watching the Aaron Judges go after offensive metrics. Defense is not as sexy, right? And so bringing back what that looks like, Eric Swanson's a stud. I mean, you look at that Baseball Savant page, he's redder than a lobster across all the key metrics like whiffs and strikeouts and hard hit percentage. Eric Swanson is among the elites when it comes to what he brings to the table in a bullpen, given it's just 1 year of production. He's still trending upwards. And then Adam Macko brings some pitching prospect into the farm system, which the Blue Jays need to replenish as well. Over in the Seattle farm system, I did a little research. He's highly touted. I mean, he's got great stuff across the board. People are really excited about Adam Macko. So I think, just like you said, Sully, Seattle was looking for offensive production. We could see that in the 17-inning game against the Houston Astros in the playoffs, right? Where it was 0-0 or whatever it was. So Seattle's looking for offense. Toronto's looking to bolster their run prevention game and bring a serious mentality. So I think it's a win across the board. It's one of the rare times where both teams win in that type of trade situation.
I have to ask this question because sometimes the offseason gets a little banana boat time, and you lose track of who goes where and where goes where. Remind me the pitching staff right now. Obviously, you got Alek Manoah. You got Chris Bassett is coming over there.
Yep.
No, Stripling's no longer there, right?
Yep, Stripling left.
Stripling left. Is Gosman still there or no? Did Gosman skedaddle?
Yeah, it'll be Manoah, Gosman, Bassett, Barrios, Kikuchi, and then probably Rio will take over for Kikuchi when he comes back in July, I believe.
Here's what I'm bringing up. Those two names, Barrios and Kikuchi. Okay. Barrios was my dark horse Cy Young pick last year for this reason. I thought the Blue Jays were going to have a 100-win season, and I thought it was one of those rising tides, sort of like someone from that team would get it, and I just sort of threw a dart at the board. I should have said Manoah, but I didn't. Barrios is still relatively young. He had a bad year last year, but he did throw a lot of innings.
Yep.
He did stay healthy. And so I can't help but look at pitchers who had down years. Obviously, Kikuchi was dreadful.
Yeah.
And Barrios was not much better. And one of the reasons why I have, and Ruth Capulis and I didn't agree on everything, here's one of the reasons why I feel good about the Blue Jays' chances. You're right there. That's like 40% of their starts they made last year, roughly, between Barrios and Kikuchi, whose ERA had an area code in it. It was so big. Okay?
Yep.
And yet the team won 92 games. And so if you take Barrios, okay, maybe he won't be the star level pitcher he was with Minnesota, or when I threw a dart at the board and made a Cy Young candidate. If he becomes an average pitcher, if he becomes, okay, whatever, he fills the role, right there, that's an improvement.
Yes.
Right there. And by doing things like you're saying, what Kiermaier brings to the table isn't as sexy as Teoscar Hernandez. It's not going to get the big contract. But there are things like, there's things that you can see in terms of focusing on catching the ball
Yes.
and making the defense elite in Toronto
Yep.
can't help but improve the stands of some of the pitchers who you're hoping will have a rebound year.
Yes. Absolutely. You're 100% correct, Sully. And I 100% agree with you. Brios is positioned for a turnaround year. You go back to 2019, he posted a 4.4 WAR. 2021, I mean, one season ago, this guy put up a 4-win season.
Yeah,
Right. And
exactly.
even as bad as he was in 2022 from a fan's perspective, he still posted a 1.1 more.
Well,
Right.
I think because he was a major league pitcher who made all of his starts. He threw
Right.
174 innings. They weren't great innings, but
Yep.
those were innings. I mean, this is something that drives me banana boats sometimes when we're constantly seeing pitchers being pulled, after 2 turns through the rotation, no
Yeah.
matter, with no regard to with how they're pitching.
100%.
Is that, gee whiz, I wonder why all of our bullpens are blown out by the time we get to the postseason. Well, they're pitching 4 innings a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes having someone, I mean, as a native New Englander, watching the Red Sox, I remember there was a bunch of times, Tim Wakefield, who pitched for the Red Sox, he may still be pitching for them for all I know. No one has ever said this. How did Wakefield do last night? Yeah, okay. No one ever said that. It was either, oh my God, he dominated, or, oh God, it wasn't pretty. But he gave them innings.
Yep.
And you knew that, you weren't going to, even if he let up 5 home runs to Detroit, he was going to pitch into the 6th. And I mean, it drives me when I say, well, he's let up 1 hit and 1 walk, struck out 15 in the first 5 and third innings. But no, it says it's 3rd time through the order. So in comes the guy who's pitched 8 days in a row. And he's like, God, his arm is bulging out because he can't throw. And then by the time we get into extra innings, whether or not they're the stupid ghost runner or not, it's like, geez, we may have to pitch a position player because we've run out of pitchers. Yeah,
Right.
maybe you should have used 3 in the 4th.
Yeah. Agree.
And someone like, again, Barrios and Kikuchi had lousy years last year. So what if they do better than lousy? I mean, Manoah had a great year last year. You could have made the case for him being the Cy Young Award winner.
Yes.
Wait, who the hell? Oh, Verlander won. Okay.
Well earned, in fairness.
Well earned. No, well earned. But I actually, I do Who Owns Baseball, where I check on who had the best game in the American League, National League. Manoah had the highest Who Owned Baseball of any American League pitcher. I think look at. Valdez is going to be the ace of that staff, of the Houston staff, and he's well-deserved. Verlander had a wonderful year. You could make the argument that Valdez was the most valuable pitcher just based on his innings pitched and everything, and I absolutely think he should have won the World Series MVP. That being said, you have a legit Cy Young contender in his mid-20s, and you have a good, Stripling is gone, but you could have, if you have those 2 pitchers who everyone knows were talented, just rise to mediocrity right there. That's a huge step up for this Toronto team.
This team, I think, is being slept on. Oh, yeah. Astronomically so. They are. I saw your episode. I believe you put it out on Monday where you did AL rankings. Mm-hmm. I have Blue Jays at 97 to 99 games, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were north of 100. And that's not me being a fanboy. That's me just looking at what they've done over the offseason. Mm-hmm. Don't quote me on this because I don't like being embarrassed and wrong, but I'm 99% positive returning they had the highest cumulative WAR on their team. So their offseason plan wasn't to replace and re-strategize. It was to restructure, to reinforce the components they already had and take them to the next level. What they did, their blueprint was pretty simple. It was add depth to the starting rotation, which they did with Bassett. I think Bassett's incredibly underrated for what he's done. He's Mr. Consistency since 2018. Dude has like
another major league pitcher who gives you a lot of innings, and that only helps the bullpen.
100%. And then you look at what they've done. They needed to add some left-handed bats. They did that with Kiermaier. They brought in Belt. however you feel about Belt. Depends on what version of Belt you're going to get, right? And
My
they
dad
also
loved
brought in
Belt.
Dalton
My
Varsho.
dad loved Belt, so I can't say a bad thing about Belt.
I think Belt is elite when it comes to plate discipline and what he does. I don't think that talent's going away. He'll still be able to produce on base percentage, which, as we've seen with Moneyball, has a direct correlation with what they can do in terms of creating runs.
He gets on base.
He gets on base. There you go.
On base.
He gets on base. And then the last thing they need to do is add swing and miss potential to the bullpen, which they did with Eric Swanson as well.
Yeah.
So I think they nailed it, man. I honestly think Blue Jays. There's only a few teams, like maybe like 3-4 teams that have had a better offseason than Blue Jays. I think if I were Blue Jays, I would have gone after a Brandon Nimmo. I would have put a little bit more bank in the penny in the bank there. I think Nimmo would have been a perfect fit. Maybe I would have gone Nimmo over Kiermaier and still went to trade after Varsho, but apples and bananas in that case. I think
Varsho is going to do great there too. I think it's a great pickup. Do you what? Look at. I think would you say 100 potential 100 wins? You think if I do, what's their over under? Their over under is like 92 wins or something like that. I mean, you got to be picking over.
That's an easy over for me.
And where you drop that bet? You drop that at FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 sportsbook in America. Sorry, we're talking America right here. And we're at the midway point of the NBA season. Will this be another Raptors year? See, I try to bring it back to you. This is the perfect time to download FanDuel because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 American dollars. Sorry, man. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's free, secure, and easy to use. You can bet on anything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlay. Say that 3 times fast. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. All right. Well, we are here. Final segment with Ben Alquist. Hey, Ben, I just assumed you were north of the border. For all I know, you're hugging Buffalo right now.
I'm in the greater Seattle area. I'm just a Blue Jays fan and advocate.
You lied to me. This is how big. This is how big a Teoscar Hernandez fan is. You followed him all the way to Seattle.
Yeah.
Your brethren in the 1977 emergency expansion. By the way, it's one of my favorite little what ifs in the history of baseball. I'll just throw this your way. I've mentioned this before, listeners of the show. The White Sox were about to move to Seattle in 1976, and Danny Kaye was going to bring them to Seattle, and the Giants were packing up to move to Toronto. And at the last minute, Bill Veeck stepped in and bought the White Sox and kept them in Chicago. And I think it was Lurie. I forget who the owner of the Giants was, but kept them in San Francisco. And the good folks of Seattle were going to sue Major League Baseball and expose the antitrust exemption. And the good folks in Toronto says, we don't care about your antitrust exemption. We're in Canada. We're going to sue the tar out of you. And in a bizarre coincidence, at that moment, suddenly baseball said, hey, we're going to expand into those specific cities. Please don't expose the antitrust exemption. And in came the Mariners and in came the Toronto Blue Jays in 1977 to placate a bunch of people who were about to sue. Okay, well, okay, this is wild and interesting. You're in the Northwest. Go Cougs, go Washington State. That's where I got my master's degree from.
Really?
So tell us a little, how did you get into the Blue Jays when you should have been hanging up pictures of Jay Buhner and
Ichiro and Randy Johnson,
and
Ken Griffey Jr.
Ken Griffey Jr. and Dan Wilson and who else were on those great teams? You had one of the Coras was there. A-Rod, remember A-Rod?
Edgar Martinez.
Jamie Moyer. Edgar Martinez was on that team.
Yep.
You know, those fun teams there. Then later you had Carlos Guillen, and later you had Ichiro, and you had Mike
Freddie
Cameron
Garcia
on those teams. Yep. and Freddie Garcia was on those teams, and you had Kaz Suzuki coming out of the bullpen, and eventually King Felix, and you should have been you've been saying my oh my and busting out the rye bread and for the grand salamis, and no, you're pining for Vernon Wells.
Yep.
So and the late great Roy Halladay, may he rest in peace. How the hell are you a Blue Jays fan?
I'm both. Listen, I'm a sports guy. When you're in a 21-year drought in your home city, you look for enjoyment elsewhere.
I hear you. I get you.
So I grew up as a little youngster on the Mariners, obviously. Shortly thereafter, the 2001 season, my dad was a big Minnesota Twins fan. And so he's like, I'm Twins and Mariners. And I was like, well, I'm Twins and Blue Jays. Ha. Excuse me. Apologies.
Awful times in the Alquist household in 1991 when they faced off in the ALCS.
Yeah, no joke there. And it's been a fun ride, especially as the Blue Jays are coming to fruition over the last couple of years. Really rekindled my interest with what they've done with the farm system, bringing up Vladdy and Bichette. And I think they've really done a good job at structuring, creating this blueprint as to where they are today. We talk about potential. Blue Jays have positioned themselves really strongly into this potential framework over the next 3-4 years. It's a scary team. And I have a lot of respect for the management and the front office side of things as they move towards strategic building. And that's where the Blue Jays are today. So listen, I'm about 50-50 between Blue Jays and Seattle. And that's what made the playoffs really challenging.
What the hell did you do this last October?
Yeah. So I'm telling you, those 2 games, it was weird because you're like, oh, I'm going to win either way. Yeah. But really, it's like,
well, guess what, Harvey Dent? You didn't.
How are you not heartbroken? If you're rooting for both teams, how are you not heartbroken by the great implosion that we saw that second game? Your heart just shatters, especially as you have that collision between Bichette and Springer in center as Seattle goes to tie the game. It's like this, do I cheer? Do I mourn? Like, what's going on? And it's like the ripping at the seams. So it was more of a lose-lose than a win-win is what it felt like.
Have you ever seen those people play themselves in chess, where they make a move and then they turn the board, and they make a move and they turn the board? That was you watching that series there.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Well, look, and you and I got connected via the Locked On MLB YouTube world.
Yep.
So you do your own thing. Tell people a little bit of what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background's in marketing communications. I've led a couple different national companies. And especially coming in 2021, 2022 season, I'm like, listen, I always tell people if you want to do something, make your own personal brand, whether you want to be an influencer dancing on TikTok or start talking about things that you enjoy, right? And so I'm like, why am I not just recording things and putting it up on YouTube? I started doing that this offseason. I started covering some offseason news and predictions. Hashtag solely halftime. There it is.
You were saying?
Yeah, I was saying. So I created at Whiskey on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, where I'm just focusing mainly on shorts, covering things like the Teoscar Hernandez trade. I did some prediction stuff going into the first GM meetings that we've had in a couple of years. And that's, I just love talking baseball. And that's why I found Locked On MLB. Is I was striving to learn more about the the landscape as a whole in the baseball space. And I think there's a lot of potential, as I'm looking at baseball fall down in terms of relative viewership compared to NFL and some of the other major sports. I'm thinking to myself, a lot of it's because there aren't content creators that are coming out here and making baseball fun and interesting. So, I found the Locked On series, the Locked On podcast series, and I think you guys are doing a great job at just speaking simplistic truth and facts and uniting communities and having fun conversations. And that's what brought us together today, Sully. So it's been a great time.
And as you can tell from the banner underneath, we're going to keep the brand going. Going to put me on the halftime show. There you go. Yeah, I want to see that Sully halftime. Let's go see that.
Maybe what you could do is like a giveaway on Twitter, on the Locked On MLB Twitter, where you require people to do hashtag Sully halftime, and you give away like a box of Built Bars.
We got to work with the good folks at Built Bar to do that.
We got to work with the guys at Built Bars.
All right. Well, hey, Ben Alquist, where can people find some of your great stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. It's Whiskey on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, and those are the 3 that you can find me at. And maybe I'll make an appearance on Locked On MLB, or maybe Locked On something else at some point. Maybe.
All right, we'll go see. Well, hey, look, it was great having you aboard. This is actually the first time we've ever talked. We've exchanged messages and everything, but the first time we've ever talked. But this is a lot of fun, and love to have you on again. By the way, I just want to thank everyone for making Locked On MLB your first listen every day. Your second listen, have that be Locked On MLB Prospects, friend of the podcast and host of that program, Lindsey Crosby. He's a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Talking about the Blue Jays with a very confused man in the Pacific Northwest who doesn't know who the hell to root for when it's time for the Jays to play the Mariners. But make sure you get Sully Halftime trending on Twitter. This has been Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.